Hello, I'm Emma Desi, and welcome to another episode of Turning Readers into Writers. If you're brand new here, welcome, and here's what you need to know. This is a community that believes you are never too old to write your first novel. No matter what you've been up to until now, if you're ready to write your book, I'm ready to help you reach the end. I focus on helping you find the time and confidence to begin your writing journey, as well as the craft and skills you need to finish the book. Each week I interview debut authors, editors and industry experts to keep you motivated, inspired and educated on all things writing, editing and publishing. If you want to catch up, head on over to emmadesi.com where you'll find a wealth of information and tools to help you get started. Before we dive in, this week's episode is brought to you by my free cheat sheet, 30 Top Tips to Find Time to Write. In this guide, I give you 30 ways that you can find time to write in the small gaps that appear between the various errands and tasks and responsibilities that you have in your day-to-day life. Now, you might be thinking that you don't have any time to spare, but I can guarantee these top tips will give you writing time you didn't think you had. If you thought writing always involved a pen and paper or a keyboard, think again. If you thought you needed at least an hour at a time to write your manuscript, I help you reframe that. You won't be disappointed. Get your free copy of 30 Top Tips to Find Time to Write by going to emmadesi.com/30 Top Tips. Okay, let's dive in to today's episode. Emma Robinson is the best-selling author of My Husband's Daughter and other women's fiction novels. She also blogs about the funny side of parenting and has contributed to podcasts such as Funny Women. Whilst her early novels are humorous, her recent work focuses on emotional themes, and these novels are both heartbreaking and life-affirming. Emma enjoys writing stories which explore the power of family and friendship in the most challenging of circumstances. She currently lives in Essex with a husband, 2 children and a small black dog. So let's get chatting to Emma, find out more about her journey to publication, why she made that switch from humorous to heartbreaking, and what advice she has for all new novelists. Well, Emma, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really genuinely delighted to have you on the show.
That's lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
A pleasure. Well, I wonder if you wouldn't mind just starting off telling us about your journey to writing and what brought you to where you are.
Absolutely. So this is a story I've told quite a lot because I do go into primary schools a little bit, and I tell the students there that I've wanted to be a writer since I was their age. So probably a lot like the listeners to your podcast, I think that urge to become a writer starts quite early. And for me, I've got a vivid memory of being in a primary school classroom when I was around 9 or 10. And there was a book by a girl called Jane Fisher, who was about the same age as me, that had been published. I don't know if people remember them. They're all about fruit and vegetables. And having always been an avid reader, that was the moment I think that I thought, hang on a minute, maybe I could do this. Maybe I could be a writer. So I guess from that point on, I'd written stories throughout sort of secondary school, university. I was always writing bits and pieces of stories and never really finishing anything. So I'd be inspired, do about 3 or 4 chapters, and then it would, life would get in the way. And then as I approached my 40th birthday, I thought, well, actually, I need to put up or shut up. I need to actually write this book that I've been talking about writing for a long time, or I need to stop saying I'm going to do it. So that's what I did. The year I turned 40, I actually finished what was a very, very rough first draft of my first novel, The Undercover Mother. And in many ways, I think, although it had taken me a long time to reach that point, I don't think, by that time I had young children, a job, a lot of friends, but you get to, nearly 40, you've accumulated, hopefully, a lot of friends. And I don't think actually I would have had the material to finish a novel until I'd got to that point. So that's what I tell myself anyway when I explain why it took me so long. But yeah, so that was the first finished novel.
Oh gosh, your story is very similar to mine in that I too was getting towards that 40 mark and thought to myself, Do it or move on.
Yeah.
Do that first draft or let it go.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But so I can absolutely relate to that. The comment that you made about, starting lots of projects and never finishing. That was certainly something that I experienced. And I think it did take me to get to be a bit older before I had that patience to sit down and just get on with it.
Yeah, yeah.
And
it is that getting on with it, isn't it? I mean, I think the best writing advice I was ever given was just get in the chair and write, because that's, even now, I'm currently writing my 9th book, and even now, I'll wash up, I'll tidy. My husband said the house is never as tidy as when I'm doing a first draft. But that's essentially it, isn't it? It's just sitting there and going until you get it done. But
yes, yeah, and it sounds so simple.
the
resistance to it.
Exactly that.
So you mentioned your husband there. I know that you've got a busy family life, 2 kids and a dog. So how do you balance the family life with the writing and the promotional work you do, the going into schools, and you co-write with you contribute with anthologies and things?
Yeah.
How do you fit it all in?
I would say boundaries and boxing off my time is vital for me. So I also teach. So I'm 3 days a week in school teaching A-level and GCSE.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I don't know how much longer I can sustain that, to be honest. But yeah, so for the last, since I was published 4 years ago, I continue to teach 3 days a week. The children are kind of in the tween phase. And then the writing. So I kind of feel like there's 3 areas of my life that I need to juggle. And up to this point, how I've managed it is by really ring fencing my time. So when I'm in school, I stay at school until my schoolwork is finished. I don't bring work home, and I get everything done. And when I'm at school, my students have every part of me. I'm focused on them and getting that done. Once I come home, I'm mum, and that's my time. And then when I have writing time, so I have Tuesdays and Fridays, I'm at home without the children. And, one of the weekend days, that's my writing time. And I have to be really focused, and I have to write in that time. So I don't have the luxury of sitting down and thinking, oh, well, I'll get a bit done. I use an app called Pacemaker, which I love, and I would recommend to anybody listening to this that finds it hard to keep themselves going, because Pacemaker's a free app, pacemaker.press, and you literally plug in the amount of words you need to do, how long you've got to do it, and it will tell you how many you've got to do each day. And if you do more or less, it will kind of jig itself around. And I find that useful. So I'm very, very focused. And I don't think I realized how important that was until lockdown. So during lockdown, I had my children home. I had to teach from home via Google Classroom, and I had books still to write. And I found that a very, very, very difficult time, because suddenly all these boundaries and all these ring-fenced parts of my life blended.
Yeah.
And emotionally, mentally, intellectually, every way, I found that really, really difficult. So I'm only just, I would say, getting out of that now, because school is starting to get back to normal. The kids are back at school, and my time is now, I can go back to that. So yeah, I would say for anyone with a busy life, keeping your writing time as precious time. So for example, on my days off, I will frequently have friends say, oh, you're home, let's meet for lunch, let's do this, which is lovely, don't get me wrong, it's lovely. But I can't. If it's something special, I will. And I've also learned that if a friend wants to meet up, I'll say, well, let's meet for breakfast, because I can do an hour first thing. Because for me, I need a run at it when I'm writing. Okay. I can't snatch half an hour here and there, because it takes me half an hour to get back up to speed of where I want to be. So it's far better for me to meet for breakfast, and then from 10 a.m. I'm at my desk until 3 o'clock when I collect the kids, and I've got to run at it. Whereas if I met for lunch, it would destroy the whole day. So it's kind of, I guess, working out how you work and ring fencing that time. But I'm also extremely fortunate to have a husband who's hugely supportive. So when I'm kind of stressing about a deadline, because obviously now I'm published, I've got deadlines to meet. It's not just my own writing, I've got to get it back to my editor. So if I've got my back against the wall on a deadline and I'm getting stressed, I will just go away for a weekend. So I'll find a cheap Premier Inn, relatively close to home, far enough away that I can't pop back, but not so far that I'm wasting time in a car. And I will literally lock myself away in a Premier Inn with a bag of stuff from Tesco and not move from Friday night till Sunday afternoon and just get it done. So yeah, so that's my process.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that with us. I sort of took away from that you have to have strong boundaries and be quite tough with yourself and honor those boundaries. And ring fence is a word that I use quite a lot, making sure that you honor those and that you give that writing time the importance that it needs. I wonder if I could just take you back to before you were published, or when you were first started writing. Did you always have those 2 days available to you, or did you at one point need to fit that writing in amongst a full-time job or having the kids at home full-time?
So initially my daughter was still at home, so I'm trying to think, actually maybe my son was still at home as well. I'm trying to think when I think they were both still at home. If he was, I'm not good with maths. He was born in 2000, and I think they were both still at home, or he was maybe just going to school. So no, that was a lot more difficult. So then it was about writing into the night. So I would get them to bed, or some nights my husband would take over bedtime. My children are not good sleepers, have never been good sleepers, so that was always a bit of a trial. And I would often sit then and write until kind of 1-2 in the morning, by which time one of them would probably wake up and I'd be putting them back to bed again. So yes, I think that was more of having to write into the night, really, at that stage. But in some ways that was easier because I didn't have my deadlines were self-imposed. So I would say I was less effective. It took me longer to do. So, Undercover Mother, with revisions and sending out to agents and things, probably, I say it took me my 40th year, but there was another couple of years on top of that before I got the publishing deal for it. I think really there was a lot of nighttime writing then, and writing around them. So if I just happened to get lucky during the day where they were both playing, I could snatch an hour with my laptop. But it was a lot more ad hoc then.
So great example there of when it's important to you, you will find it. You'll find a way to make it work for you. And so for any of our listeners that is looking for those gaps in your day or gaps in your week where you can make that your writing time and honor it and sit down and give it to yourself as a treat and a gift.
Absolutely. And I watched no TV during that time, apart from with the children. Absolutely none. So it's quite funny. Now there's so many TV series which I'm catching up on during lockdown, particularly, that I was catching up on, that people watched 6 years ago that I have no clue about. For me, it's all new TV because I just didn't, it was TV or writing. That was the choice, really. And I couldn't give up reading. So TV went.
Oh, well, I bet you're glad that you made the choice to write, because it's gone from strength to strength. My goodness. And so you mentioned there the querying couple of years there. What advice do you have for any new writers who are starting out? They're looking now to find an agent or a publisher. They want to go that traditional route.
Okay, so I'd say there's a couple of things to think about. One is, in terms of the traditional route, if you want to go to the big publishers, the big name publishers, you're going to need an agent, which I'm sure they know. But there is a second route. So I'm with a digital first publisher, Bookouture, who are part of Hachette. Hachette are obviously a big publisher, and Bookouture are a digital imprint of Hachette. And a lot of these digital first publishers will take direct submissions without an agent, which is what I did. I did submit to agents at the same time, but I also sent the whole manuscript to Bookouture as well. So some of the smaller imprints as well, so smaller publishers will take directly rather than through an agent. But either way, I think really in many ways it's a numbers game. So first of all, you need to really be clear on who you're submitting to. Just sending it out as a blanket send out is pretty fruitless, because particularly if you're going onto agents' websites, agents and publishers are very specific about what they're looking for. So if you've written a sci-fi romance, there is absolutely no point submitting to an agent that only represents horror or literary fiction. So you need to be really clear, and there's lots of resources out there for that. I used a website, part of Jericho Writers, which was called Agent Hunter. I'm not sure if it's still called that. And that's an online database of agents which It's similar in, I guess, to what probably most people use, which is a writers and artists yearbook, which is very useful and it's very expensive. So just get it out, use it at the library. Don't buy a copy. I shouldn't say that, but you know, it is quite expensive. That's useful. But I found Agent Hunter was good because it was updated during the year. And the thing is, in this industry, is agents move around quite a lot, and people in publishing move around quite a lot. So do your research, find an agent that you think, or a publisher that you think wants to publish the kind of books that you're publishing. Another route is follow agents on Twitter, because a lot of agents, and I've seen 2 or 3 this week, which I've tagged unpublished friends in, where agents are opening up because some agents will only have a few months in a year where they're accepting submissions, and then they'll close their books. So if you're on their, if you're following them on Twitter, you'll be the first to hear about that. So keep an eye on what's going on. And then I would say, don't focus all your desire on one agent, because I think that's the root of disappointment. If there are so many people out there, and there's so much luck involved in the whole thing. I'm probably being a bit random now, but I know that when I had Undercover Mother published, my wonderful editor, who's still my editor now, had just got back from maternity leave, and my book was about a woman on maternity leave. So, the stars aligned for me perfectly. And it's sometimes that little bit of luck that actually makes the difference between, there's so many great books out there that don't get published because there's so much luck. So don't be despondent if you're sending out and not getting a response, because you only need one response. So kind of keep going. So yeah, I guess in summary, it's do your research on the agents. Keep an eye on the agents on social media, particularly Twitter, I think is quite useful. And then start sending out. I sent out a batch of 6, I think, the first time. And kind of every time you get a rejection, and expect the rejections, because then they hopefully won't hurt quite so much, although they will. When you get a rejection, then send another one out. Keep it going, keep going. And listen to feedback, because if you're really, really fortunate, one of the first agents that rejected me very, very generously gave me 3 pages worth of feedback as to why Undercover Mother wasn't ready for publication, and she was spot on in every single respect, and it was immensely useful. So although it was a rejection, she did me a huge favor. So if you get anything other than a standard response, take that as a real positive, because it means that they think you've got something.
Yeah, they've taken that time to actually read the whole thing.
Absolutely.
Wonderful kind of feedback there, and an insight there into the business of publishing, because I think, as when we're new and we're excited and all we see just the published authors out there and the bestsellers, and we think that that's what it's all about, and wouldn't it be marvelous? But actually the harsh reality of publishing is that it is hard, it is tough. As you mentioned, it's a numbers game, there's an element of luck. The industry is shrinking in many ways, so bearing all of that in mind, just to kind of manage not necessarily expectation, but that level of taking it personally and feeling that it's not good enough. But I love too your advice there about looking at the smaller imprints like Bookouture, that going that digital first route, which I would imagine not many people are aware of. And so that's something really good to look for. And Bookouture are great.
They are fabulous.
Such a good imprint.
Yeah.
A lot of my favorite writers are with them. And then the information as well, to the advice about going to agent hunters through Jericho Writers and the yearbook, of course. Such great tips. So thank you for that, Emma. That's really helpful for my listeners. Thank you.
Fantastic.
So you mentioned your first book there, which, as I mentioned in your bio, is a much more humorous look at family life, and then you've made the transitions into the kind of what we call women's fiction, I guess, which are the more kind of heartfelt, emotional stories. So what made you make that switch from one to the other?
I guess, I can credit my editor at Bookouture. And that's one thing, if you get an editor that you work really well with. So, as I say, we're currently working on our 9th book together, and she's been amazing at not just managing each book, but kind of helping me shape my career quite a lot. So, which is fantastic if you get to work with someone that kind of gets your writing and gets what you're trying to do. So, yeah, as I say, the first 3 books were all more humorous. Sales of the first two are okay. The sales of the third one, pretty poor. So I'd signed a 3-book deal, and I thought, right, that's me done. That's me. I can remember 2 or 3 days of schlepping around the house like Sylvia Plath, kind of, dressed from head to toe in black. It's all over. It's all, and this is part of publishing. I think it is a bit of a roller coaster emotion. Writers by definition, I guess, are quite empathetic, which means we really feel every part of it, don't we? So so I, and then we had a long phone meeting to talk about it, and she was so lovely and so complimentary about my writing. And she said to me, I just feel like you've got a bestseller in you, and we need to think about what we need to do next. And her, Bookertrue are fantastic at looking at reviews, looking at what sells. They're very commercially focused. And what she said to me was, looking at my reviews, the part of my novels, even though they were humorous, the part of my novels that readers had responded to in reviews were the more emotional storylines, were the moments where it maybe made them shed a tear. And she said, I think that's where we should go next. I think we should, look for bigger issues, look for the emotional side of things, and kind of move away, not move away from the humor completely, because I hope that there are lighter moments in my book still, because no one wants to read something that's depressing all the way through. They are emotional, but I hope there's still a light element too. And she said that's the way to go. So that's when I wrote My Silent Daughter, which was about a mother struggling with a daughter who she thought might be autistic. And then I kind of went into, and that book did a lot better, and we've moved on and on and on in that vein. And I think with each one, I'm getting a little bit braver in terms of the subject matter, that I'm covering, which is really scary every time, because when you're writing about things that people have happened to them in their real life, there's a lot of a responsibility with that, and it's scary, and I live in fear of someone saying, no, you got that wrong. But yeah, I'm loving it. I'm really enjoying kind of really digging deeper into myself and into the stories.
And did you find that, in terms of your own writing style and the way that you approach a manuscript, did you find that shift quite easy, or was there a sort of transition period?
I don't know. I think relatively easy, because I think in all 3 of the previous books, there had always been a thread in it that was quite emotional. And I like emotion, I like nothing better than a real movie that I can cry to. So, and again, it's that whole thing about reading in the genre that you want to write. I've always read books that make me cry. So in terms of this writing, I don't think it was a huge shift. In terms of trusting myself, maybe, in terms of I think it makes you for me, I think it made me a little bit more vulnerable, because obviously by then I haven't got a big platform. I'm no Jodie Pickle, but I had followers, I had readers, and I was scared that they would say, hang on a minute, we buy your books to make us laugh, what are you doing here? And secondly, I think it's that whole thing of getting it wrong. And I think I grew up very much in a home when things were tough, we'd laugh about it. You can't do that with my own children. Let's try and cheer ourselves up, let's laugh. And I think you can hide behind laughter. I'm getting a bit deep here, but I think you can hide behind laughter quite a lot. And when you kind of peel that back and you have the bare emotion, you kind of are making yourself quite vulnerable. So I think the very long answer to your question is, I don't think the writing was more difficult, but I think the emotional connection and the vulnerability was more difficult. And I think I still find that difficult every time that I write, because I think, right, this is the one where people are going to start pointing the finger and saying, how dare you? But yeah, no, so I think it's harder. But I guess if it didn't make me feel like that, the writing wouldn't be good.
I think there's a lot to be said of that. I think people who write women's fiction, those darker, kind of more realistic stories, almost, as writers, we are having to kind of dig into a side of ourselves that maybe isn't the nicest part of ourselves, so that we can pull out these characters and these storylines. And I think vulnerable is absolutely the right word. I certainly always worry that people will think my characters are me, and have I done that, and do I say that? And
absolutely.
trying to have that little bit of distance can be tricky. But you've mentioned too as well that your subject matter, you're getting more and more brave with it, I think was the word that you used. So where do you get your story ideas from? And bearing in mind that as writers, we come up with a million ideas a day, how do you determine, okay, which is the one that is going to stick and actually you can develop into a full storyline? And do you have a process for that?
Yeah, I think process is probably giving it a bigger name than it actually is. It feels a bit more random than that. But I think what I've learned is, I think there's two things. By nature, I have things I want to write about rather than plots that come to me. So I think I want to write about emotional abuse, or I want to write about what it would be like for X to happen to you. And I kind of pitch these ideas to my editor, and she says, yeah, it's really great, but where's the actual plot? Like, we need a plot. So I think what I've learned is that I love the what if. I think Jodie Picoult particularly is excellent at this. You know, what would you do if?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very fortunate, again, to be 47 and have lots of friends who have lived many lives and being able to steal bits and pieces from them. I listen to people all the time. I'm very nosy. I love to learn about people's lives. And for me, I often have an idea which isn't enough for a story, and I'll write that up and I'll store it on my computer and put it in the back of my head. And then sometimes another idea will come to me, and then I think, right, if I put those two together, that's a plot.
Okay.
So to Save My Child, the one that's just out, my brain's gone on my main character's name. That's terrible. The mother. Gosh, it's because I've been writing today, the new one. So that one's gone from my brain. So the mother in that.
Abby.
No.
Oh.
Libby's the daughter. Oh my gosh, it's really embarrassing.
I'm going to look it up. You carry on.
Yeah, okay. It's really embarrassing. But yes, so the mother that obviously has every worst nightmare. Her daughter is dangerously ill, and that's a nightmare. But there's not a plot there. That's something we can relate to. It's an idea, but it's not a plot. But then I had the idea of, and I was actually guided to this for this one by another writer friend. We were talking about this. You've got this idea that what if you had to go to the person that you least wanted to go to for help? And that had come from a conversation, a lunch with a friend who had just escaped from quite an emotionally abusive relationship. So that was an idea that had been at the back of my head for maybe 2-3 years. And then I suddenly thought, right, if I put those two together, now we've got a dilemma, now we've got a plot. So I think it's kind of picking up bits and pieces all the time and just letting my brain chew on them, and then two bang together and I have the plot. And that's kind of my process.
It's a good process though, and I think it's certainly one that Stephen King always, I think, talks about, isn't it? It's that what if, taking how, then that's how you take something ordinary and kind of make it extraordinary.
Yeah.
And it's Anna,
thank you so much. It's because I'm writing about Julia at the moment, so all I can think of is Julia.
Save Julia for a moment because we are going to come back to her later. But that's, so that idea of what if is really, and I think it's kind of sparks the brain then to think in slightly different ways, and outside the box.
And also pushes you, because another thing that my editor says to me frequently is, right, you need to up the stakes. You know, because I'll say, oh, this could happen. She'll say, yeah, but she can easily get out of that. You need to up the stakes. Why can't she? And sometimes I feel like I'm literally throwing all these horrible things at my characters. But that's, you know, there's no point giving a character a dilemma where the reader can think, well, she just needs to do this. You know, we've all watched those awful TV shows where, or films, and the characters running all over the place, and you think, that's ridiculous. Just go there and tell the person that and it'll be fine. You don't, there can't be an easy out for the characters. Otherwise there's no dilemma.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. And so that's where that kind of why people say you've got to be so mean to your characters, so that your reader can feel that tension and that stakes and want to follow through. So your most recent book, To Save My Child, it was published last month. Big congratulations.
Thank you.
So what can you tell us about it? You've sort of hinted at it, but what more can you tell us?
Yeah, so basically it is, from one point of view, so the previous couple of books had actually been a split narrative between two characters, which I've done a few times and I'm doing again at the moment. So it was the first time I'd sort of stayed with one character, and I needed to do that because I needed the reader to really feel the dilemma that she was going through. So Anna is a single mother to Libby, a 6-year-old girl. And chapter 1, Libby collapses. They go to hospital, and Libby has a kidney disease. And Anna is not a donor. She cannot be a donor. She's not a match for a kidney transplant that her daughter needs, nor is anybody else. So because of her love for her daughter, she would do anything for her daughter, like every mother would. She has to then go to her ex-partner, who she's recently, only months previously, managed to get away from, who was, as we begin to find out, not a very pleasant man. And that kind of unfolds as the novel goes on. So I think what I really wanted to explore is this whole thing that a mother will do anything for her daughter, her child, in terms of sacrificing herself, and just to what lengths a mother will go to make sure that her daughter is safe and well. Mm-hmm. And obviously there are other twists and turns along the way. There's other characters that come in. Hopefully there's a couple of other characters who are nice characters to kind of give a bit of balance, so it's not tense all the way through. But I think what I enjoyed most in this book is the gradual unfolding of Ryan's character, the father's character, because having spoken to quite a few people about that kind of partner, that sort of narcissistic, emotionally abusive partner, it opened my eyes really to how common it is. And possibly I'm being very naive here, but I hadn't realised how many women have been in a relationship with someone like that. And I've had quite a lot of feedback from people, which has been quite humbling, to be honest, because again, as I said previously, as soon as you start to realise how many people have experienced this, that responsibility to convey it in the right way becomes even more important. So I've never had an all-out baddie before, I think, so I really did enjoy that aspect of it, but also it to keep that tension going the whole way through for Anna, and that was quite a challenge as well. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed writing it, and I've been really, really blown away by the reviews, which has been fantastic.
Quite right. So in terms of research for a new subject like the kidney disease, how did you go about that? This was an experience that you knew through somebody else? Were you able to talk to them? Was it online? Did you speak to any medical staff? What did you do?
Yeah, so always for me, the first stage is to go to YouTube, because I think there's it's amazing what people will put on YouTube that's very personal. And it's a really good first stage, because when I did speak to people that have had kidney transplants, I'll speak about that in a second, but I think you can't keep going back to people and asking them questions. You can a couple of times, but I can't be, saying to someone, can I have an hour of your time? Can I have another hour of your time? So I like to think that by the time I've speaking to somebody that's experienced it, I know which questions I need to ask. So I'm not using too much of their time. So I start off with YouTube and get some general information, work out what might work with my plot, what I can use. So for example, I can't explain too much detail because it will give away stuff in the book, but there are a couple of things that happen in the later stage of testing for whether or not Ryan is a donor, which I got completely from a YouTube video and someone's experience. And I thought that would be a great plot twist. So sometimes the research feeds the plot, which is also interesting. Yeah. So when I've got that, I then normally I usually know people. So a lot of the things I've written about, I do know people that have been through similar things, but weirdly, I don't know anybody that's had a kidney transplant. So I literally put on my Facebook, any of my friends knows anyone that's had a kidney transplant that would happily spend an hour answering some questions on the telephone. And I was very fortunate that 2 of my friends knew people who were willing to do that. So I had long telephone conversations with 2 people that had slightly different experiences. One of whom was donated a kidney by her father, and the other one by a stranger. So it was really interesting to hear the 2 different stories and work out what I wanted to do. And that is immensely helpful, because I go with my questions and they answer them. And it is amazing how honest and how open people are willing to be, and generous with their information. And then also as they're talking, sometimes they will say things which, again, like I say, will feed into the plot, and I think I have to use that in the book because it's such a great thing. And you know, and 95% of what you're told will not make it into the book. And I think you need to be careful to not, you know, this is not a book about how to do a kidney transplant. You know, no one's going to read this and then know everything about kidney transplants. All I'm looking for are those 3 or 4 really specific details that if someone reads it that has had a kidney transplant, they'll say, yes, she's done her research. Yes, she knows what she's talking about. So yeah.
A good thing to mention there is that 95% doesn't make it in, because sometimes I think if we've done a lot of research, we really want to demonstrate that we've done that, and then we can end up just kind of info dumping. Look what I've done. Look what I've done.
Exactly that.
A good word of caution there.
My editor has got a really good way of talking about. She says about, you know, getting that plot first as like the skeleton of the story, and then you can lay on the things that you want to talk about, but the plot drives what you put in it, not the other way around. So you're not kind of writing about a kidney research, I'm writing about a mother who has to make a big decision, you know, and that's what I'm writing about, and everything else is incidental.
So it sounds like your editor is very involved in the process. She doesn't just come in at the end and look at your first draft or even your second draft. You're discussing this with her as you go along.
Yeah, I would say that's happened more with later books. So, you know, the first 3 I kind of delivered as it was. Obviously, the first one I did because that's what I submitted. But the next 2, even I kind of submitted a first draft, and then we talked about it. And then I think there was a couple of books where the structural edit was quite big. And, you know, I had to check, you know, once I'd written it from 3 perspectives, and she said, actually, I think you want it from 1 perspective. That was Happily Never After. So it was a huge structural edit. So very quickly, we kind of realized that actually it would be better to have you know, I now submit quite a detailed synopsis before, you know, almost a chapter by chapter synopsis. I am a planner, not a pantser. She will have input there. So that really helps a great deal. And then for this particular book that I'm writing at the moment, I've written a first draft, but I know it's not right. You know, it's fine, but I know it's missing something. So I sent it to her and said, I need your magic wand on this one. I know I'm missing something. I don't know what it is. And we had a lovely lunch last week, and we spoke for about 2.5 hours about lots of other things, but we then talked about the book. And she's very talented at being able to take that sort of helicopter view. I think when you're a writer, you're so close to the plot that it's sometimes difficult to see what it's missing. And that's the other advice I'd give people about. I know it's hard when it's your book, baby, but not being too precious about it because you are too close to it to realise. And I think there's that famous quote, isn't there? If someone tells you there's something wrong with your book, they're probably right. If they tell you how to fix it, they're probably wrong. Which I think is great. But I think with my editor, she's great at saying, you know, this is what it is. And I left that meeting after feeling quite, oh goodness, I've lost my way with this. I left that meeting excited to get back to it and, you know, and start. And I knew she'd kind of just hit that nail on the head of what I was really trying to do with the book. So yes, she is very involved. It
shows how important that having a good relationship is, that
absolutely.
You can discuss openly and constructively about
absolutely
as well.
And I would say, but just because obviously your listeners are possibly not at the stage of having an editor, for the first books I had writer friends who were beta readers, so I did the Jericho Writers self-edit course, which is absolutely fantastic. Debbie Alper teaches that course, and it's not cheap, but it was the best thing I've ever done for my writing. And from that, there were a group of 5 of us who were trying to get published, and we used to, you know, we lived all around the country. We'd meet up once a year for a weekend, and we would send each other things and beta read for one another. And if you can get that, it's so vital, because, you know, there's things like whole characters where I thought, you know, this character is well-rounded and great, and they'd say, well, that character's not very likable. And I think, well, what do you mean she's not likable? She's lovely. But clearly it hadn't come across on the page because you're too close. You know those characters like your best friends. So yeah, it's really vital to get somebody else's eyes on it, I would say.
And so how long for you now, because your 9th book, my goodness,
yeah,
how long does it take you from initial idea to let's say, final draft?
About 5 or 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah,
so it's a good pace.
2 books a year. 2 books a year I'm publishing at the well, I'm not publishing, Bookature are publishing of mine. Yeah, 2 books a year. So yeah, first draft, I would say, no, probably a bit. It really varies actually. I would say, yeah, first draft about 4 months, and then 2 months of edits.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's a nice ballpark for our
Yeah.
listeners, and for me too. And for me. So you've mentioned Julia, I think I remember
Yes.
rightly. So tell us about if you can, what you're working on at the moment.
Yeah, it's still in quite an early stage, but this is another sort of dual narrative. So 2 mothers again. So these are 2 mothers that have been friends in the past. They met when their children were young and have probably sort of drifted apart. They're both very quite different. And then a big thing happens, which I can't talk about, but it's a big thing happens, and they're kind of thrown back together. And it's a kind of for one of the mothers, it's kind of, what would you go? How far would you go for your daughter? And for the other one, it's her journey is a bit more internal, and it's a bit more realizing and taking stock of life a little bit. I know I'm being really vague there, but it really is in embryonic phase. And I think, should my editor catch this, I'll be in big trouble. So yeah, I'm being very vague. But it's 2 mothers again. All my books are about mothers, and all my books are about female friendship. Because female friendship is something that's really important to me, and has been big in my own life. So it's something I really enjoy writing about.
Oh, lovely. Well, I'm excited for that one coming out. That'll be next year now, I guess.
Yes, I think March or April. April, I think, next year.
Lovely. Oh, well, just to round off, just where can listeners find out a little bit more about you and your books online?
Right, so I've got a blog called Motherhood for Slackers. So if they want anything that's a bit more fun, you can visit me at motherhoodforslackers.com. But I've also got a relatively recent website called emmarobinson.writes.com, so which does need to be updated. But yes, you'll be able to find me or on Facebook or on Twitter. So on Twitter, I'm at Emma Robinson UK.
Lovely. That is great. Well, I'll link to those in the show notes. Emma, it's been a joy speaking with you. You've shared so generously about your own experience and your own thoughts and your own processes in your writing life. I really appreciate the time you've taken today.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found that helpful and inspirational. Now, don't forget to come on over to Facebook and join my group, Turning Readers into Writers. It is especially for you if you are a beginner writer who is looking to write their first novel. If you join the group, you will also find a free cheat sheet there called 3 Secret Hacks to Write with Consistency. So go to emmadesi.com/turning readers into writers, hit join. Can't wait to see you in there. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.